joining us for this part 2 of improving reading comprehension, a topic that Renee and I just feel so passionately about. After over 2 decades of teaching homeschoolers to read, my children as well as the children in my program, there's certain patterns that emerge. There's certain things that you start to notice keep coming up. And so in this series, we're really trying to help to share those with you. Whatever curriculum you have and however your child is, we don't think that there's only going to be one way. There's going to be many different ways that are going to work with different children. And part of this video is talking about that, thinking about your particular child. And as homeschoolers, we have a lot of choice in what we do, finding just the right choices for your child so that they'll first make that leap into advanced reading comprehension and then keep going from there and expanding from there. I hope you enjoy this video. We all want our kids to read the classics, right? What will happen to many of our children is that they will also be those kind of readers where they love the classics. They may love, the classical literature, but they may also love, American authors, the ones that we think of that we really want to expand on, want our children to know and to have this kind of wheelhouse of literature and culture. And that is going to be so wonderful for lots of kids. But other kids are going to find themselves kind of not engaged in those books. I had a student who came to me, and just kind of a little backstory, I taught a class for kids in it was 8th to 10th grade, and it was for kids who really, we wanted them to become active readers, but maybe they weren't, buying into the idea of what our parents, we want our kids to love the most difficult books, right? We want that to happen. But anyway, I was talking to him about his reading comprehension because after class, I had said to him, let's talk about what's happening here. Let's kind of go through this. And he told me that the problem with his reading is he had been oppressed by the tyranny of boring books. Oppressed by the tyranny of boring books. I actually thought this was like hysterical, although at the time I acted like, okay, yeah. But here's the thing, if your child is not going where you need them to go with classics and sort of beautiful, brilliant books, it's time to instead think, hey, I need to grow a reader here. This is my first thing. And so your particular child may need a different kind of book to read independently. And you may even find yourself needing to kind of adapt the ones that are as part of your curriculum. Because the best thing you can do is offer for this kind of kid high interest books that are going to get them to read. Because the child who will pick up books and start reading independently is a child who will become a better reader.
I think that one of the things that really benefited me advancing my reading comprehension level is that my mom taught a literature class, but a unique take she had on it is that when it came to curriculum, she allowed her students to collectively pick individually and then collectively vote on what novels we wanted to read and what we thought was most interesting. And I think that really benefited me a lot and the other readers in the class because it allowed us to desire to want to read because we were interested in the novels. And I think that goes really far in helping a child advance their reading comprehension levels because I strongly believe that there's no one curriculum or genre or even novel that will really advance your child's reading comprehension more. It's more the fact that we were able, especially in junior high, when we were developing the most in our reading comprehension level, is that we were able to choose and that we were interested in that we were just making sure to read novels that were for our age group, but that were also interesting to us.
Include some books maybe that are even too easy to read and that are really within your child's grasp. So they get that feeling of easy, fun, enjoyable, relaxing reading, right? And you may even find that going back to easier books is a way to make your child enjoy it enough that you can start asking questions about comprehension there and kind of build to the harder books. Carefully consider stretch books because even for kids like this, we want stretch books that are within their grasp, but they're not too hard. And so that's kind of a trial and error thing. But for a lot of kids, you want to really limit exposure to books that are just incomprehensible or beyond them, because that becomes really frustrating and they can start to get in this kind of downward spiral from reading. So even a child who's like a super reader, make sure that the books that you're asking your child to really dig into, that it's the ones that are really difficult, that are really rough reading, are sort of limited until that last part of high school, because you really want them to love reading. You really want them to build their skills with joy and want to keep reading, right, rather than become discouraged.
There are several reading comprehension strategies that I've used in middle school and high school, and that I use now in college, and that I probably will continue to use long after. I think one of the biggest ones is just to read as much as I possibly can just for fun. Because I think if the only reading we ever do is for school, it can feel really high pressure when there is something we have to read and absorb, because we feel like this is maybe a grade is writing on it, or it's an exam, an important homework assignment, and we feel a lot of stress, like, am I really absorbing this all? I really want to do well. And because of all that pressure in that moment, we end up delivering not as well as we could have otherwise. So I think reading just for fun is really important, because it allows us to practice all of those necessary reading comprehension skills in a way that's totally stress-free, totally low pressure because there's nothing riding on it. And it's just fun, but we're learning and we're practicing all of those same skills. Then when we do find ourselves in maybe a higher intensity situation, like an important exam or a reading comprehension assignment, those same skills we've practiced so long just reading on our own for fun will show up in those higher intensity moments where it really matters, where a grade is riding on it or it's something important for our education.
One thing that's really important, and in some of the book classes that I've taught, where again, my big goal was to build readers, was to let kids pick the books, even in small book groups, to let them have some say, or maybe even a lot of say, into books that they want to read. That some of the books are just fun, easy, enjoyable experiences. Consider throwing in some graphic novels. I mean, there's graphic novels now about Shakespeare. And so that visual component mixed in with the written component can kind of make something click for a lot of kids, like putting those two things together. Particularly if you have a child that is perhaps not a super imaginative person. If a child doesn't sort of see the story in their head and it's just the words, it can be really hard to make that connection and love reading. And so graphic novels can really do that, where they start to put that into a kid's brain and have that thing.
When I was younger, reading graphic novels really helped me with reading comprehension. And this is one of the examples of the graphic novels of Romeo and Juliet.
You really want to help your kids discover something that they won't put down. I know Renee has her oldest son is just crazy about the classics. He just loves reading classical history. My daughter, who is a Latin teacher, is the same thing. Like, anything about ancient Greece, Latin, Rome, she's all over it. She loves to read it, particularly the language. But not everybody that's not going to be it for everybody. I have another son who really got going reading about fish. Like, even if it was not a book that other people would think was interesting or was particularly compelling, because he so much wanted to know about fish, he would work his way through the hardest vocabulary to understand fish. There's lots of things like this. But there's other kids who are really not going to enjoy fiction. And if you're somebody who loves fiction, oh my goodness, it's so hard to take that your child is just really not, compelled to read this. But if that happens, you still need that child to love reading. And so you might want to consider something else. Like, you might get a magazine subscription to some kind of thing that has a lot of what your child really wants to read about in there. But even if your child only wants to read graphic novels, or even if your child only wants to read fish, try to start building into these more difficult books and get some classics in later in high school, because it's really going to serve them well if they do read those things at the end. But obviously, first you want to build this love of reading, you want to build this excitement, but try to be moving towards those more difficult books. So There's a real power in homeschooling that we can pick the genres that our children can read. We should probably make use of this option more. So even if you have purchased a curriculum, there's still more books to read. I know I've told this story before, but all of my children did this where they had a rolling suitcase. We went to the library once or twice a month, I guess pretty much almost once a week, and they got to fill their bags with books, picture books, fiction books, nonfiction books, books that hit the topics. Like, okay, today they have a list. You need to find a book about airplanes. You need to find a book about the country of Russia. You need to find some books that you just want to read because you love them. This is a really powerful thing, and it's really connecting the communication process of reading, right? But it's getting them excited about going. Because we know that the SAT or the ACT is coming, having your child read books from a lot of different subjects is really important, even when you're 5th, 6th, 7th grade. Getting them used to reading a book about different things slowly is much easier than if the first time your child sees an article about psychology is on the SAT, right? Like if you've slowly been building on that, it's better. Another thing that we have an advantage of as homeschoolers is letting our children sort of live in the land of happy books. So even if you're letting your child pick the books, if you see that your child has picked something that seems to you like, pretty violent or pretty depressing, you probably want to pull that out and say, why don't we try something else? So the thing that I'm trying to say here, and Renee and I are both saying over and here, is you want your child to read, 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 read. More is more. Suitcases of joy, 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 joy. Scheduling in that reading time is really important. Asking your child to read and have many different questions. Setting up a family book time where we're all going to sit down together here and read for a half hour every night or 2 days a week. Like having that family reading time put in place.
What I found most beneficial for my reading comprehension was reading aloud to both my mom and to my great aunts. When reading to my great aunts, my mom would send them copies of the books we were reading and have me read it to them over the cell phone. Reading aloud helped me to learn how to pronounce difficult words and how to read with an interesting voice. Additionally, it helped me to ask questions and enhance my understanding of the books we were reading.
Even if you don't go to homeschool group, gathering some other children that your kids know through their homeschooling other activities to have a book group and talk about books and explore the joy of talking about books is a really great way to bring in books. You can also do different kind of things to get that read, read, read. And one of them is just the idea of singing. So just like I talked about how for some kids, the visual graphic novel kind of with the words put something together. For other kids, it's going to be with singing. So having your child sing or talk lyrics as they point to the words with you. It could be a popular song that you printed off the internet. It could be a hymnal. It doesn't work as well like if you go to church where it's up front because you want to go over it word by word. All of these kind of things where you're singing and talking can also help some kids really make that connection. For some kids, it's going to be a really strong connection between singing and the words. I had a child that really loved those old dirges of, Lake Michigan, boats that crash kind of things. And they go really slow, so they're really great. But anyway, the other thing you can make use of is subtitles on the TV. So you can start by saying like, hey, for the first fourth of this family night show, we are going to take turns acting it out. And you read this person, I read this person, or we all read it together. And then we're going to go through it. And again, that visual component of they see the action happening and they're reading it, you might probably want to turn the sound down so that they have to read it. Also can help make those connections, right? You're reading and reading and reading, but you're making layers and layers and layers of connections.
I learn best by seeing things, and so reading the subtitle of the movie really helped me with my reading comprehension. And all the actions and the words of the movie really helps me understand what the scene is. And along with that, it really helped me with my reading as well.
And the other thing is, even though it might seem to you like, hey, we're past this, keep reading aloud to your children and read in an interesting way because you want them to also understand the inflections and tone and the meaning that can be changed in reading by what we say, like how it comes alive outside, outside of the pages can also be changed by how we choose to interpret our voice tone. It's a really important thing, and it's really much easier to get when they're hearing it said by you, or it could be books on tape in the car that after you hear someone reading, you're asking your child about them. Renee, what did you want to add?
Thanks, Helen. There's so many ideas in there that I really loved, and I really love your idea about many genres and finding those books that maybe, because as you said, I teach these classical literature classes, and by the time that's in high school, by the time I get those kids, I can really tell how much work has been done at home in getting those children inspired to read. I can tell those students who prefer just to find and pick out those facts that are really there only because their parents force them to be there. They don't really love reading those types of books. And at an early age, getting them to read whatever books that they like, pick up on those books. And then you can start to add more and more books as their confidence builds, as they progress along. And I really also loved your idea about sort of this family book group sort of situation where you're reading a book in your family and you're talking about that book. I think what you're doing is you're really building that culture of reading right in your home. Your children are seeing you read. They're seeing that you are investing that time to read for yourself, to read for them, and that you enjoy discussing those books, those just for fun family books that you're reading. Doesn't have to be part of the curriculum. As we've talked about before, I have 2 students in college, and when they're home and they're talking with their younger brothers about what books they're reading, there's so much excitement because there's this shared experience of, oh, you're reading White Fang? I remember when I read White Fang. Have you gotten to this part yet? And discussing those books. And there's a lot of excitement, even in children who are now grown adults, who are reminiscing about those books that they read when they were younger. And as Helen said, my oldest son is home, and he loves to read with his little brothers. They have more than one copy of a book, and they take turns reading pages. And this is something, of course, they're out playing soccer and they're playing games and things, but something they do daily is read together. Even right now, when I'm doing a video with Mrs. Hagan, my son said, go get your books, boys. We'll go sit out. It's a nice day. We'll go sit outside at the picnic table and we'll read books together. So when you build that culture of reading, they know it's a fun family activity for them to be doing. They know that you value it and you value their interest in reading. Thanks, Helen.
Thank you, Renee. Thanks for joining us. I hope you found this helpful. There's a lot of different pieces in here to kind of think about and mull over, and I hope that some of them really speak to you. Please consider joining us for part 3 of this series, where we're going to talk about, among other things, the importance of vocabulary and a variety of other things. If you really enjoyed our video, consider giving us a thumbs up and maybe subscribing. Have a great day, and I hope we see you again on another one of our videos.